Russell's pole is not the real story anymore. The real story is whether his own words can survive Ferrari's proof. Because Verstappen crashed at turn 9. Yellow flags appeared. Antonelli backed out immediately. Leclerc was close enough to take the front of the grid. And Russell still crossed the line fastest. 1 minute, 6.113 seconds. Mercedes called it pole. Ferrari called it suspicious. Russell said he lifted, but if the data shows he carried too much speed, gained time, or failed to sacrifice enough through the yellow flag zone, this becomes bigger than a deleted lap. It becomes a credibility crisis. Because a pole can be lost. A grid position can be changed. But once a driver's explanation is questioned, every future yellow flag follows him. And the most dangerous part is inside Mercedes. One driver chose safety and gave up the lap. One driver chose the limit and took the reward. If Ferrari proves that reward should never have stood, Russell does not just lose pole. He loses trust. Subscribe to the channel. The first layer of this story is not the lap time. It is the contradiction. Because when George Russell crossed the line in Austria, the timing screen said one thing. Pole position. But the track had just said something completely different. Danger. Max Verstappen had gone off at turn 9. Yellow flags had appeared. The final sector had stopped being a normal piece of racing asphalt and had become a warning zone, a place where every driver was supposed to think less about lap time and more about what was ahead. That is why Russell's lap instantly became so dangerous. Not because Mercedes lacked speed. Not because Ferrari was miles faster. Not because the session needed drama. It became dangerous because Russell was fastest at the exact moment when being fast started to look suspicious. And that is where Ferrari saw the opening. Charles Leclerc was close. Close enough for every fraction to matter. Close enough that one lift, one throttle trace, one tiny moment of lost speed could separate Ferrari from the front of the grid. And when Russell finished ahead, Ferrari did not just see a rival beating them. They saw a question. Did Russell really sacrifice enough under yellow flags? That word matters. Sacrifice. Because a yellow flag is supposed to cost a driver something. Is supposed to interrupt the lap. Is supposed to force a clear response, not a clever calculation. It tells the driver that danger comes first and the stopwatch comes second. But Formula One drivers are trained to fight that instinct. They are trained to save every fraction. Brake 1 meter later. Lift 1 meter less. Get back on power 1 heartbeat earlier. Carry just enough momentum to keep the lap alive without crossing the line. That is what makes them elite. And under normal conditions, that is exactly what fans admire. But under yellow flags, the same instinct becomes dangerous. Because the question is no longer, how much time can you save? The question becomes, how much time are you willing to give up when safety demands it? That is the uncomfortable place Russell now occupies. He said he lifted. Mercedes defended him. The stewards looked at the situation. But Ferrari's pressure comes from a much sharper angle. Not did he react at all, but did he react enough? That is where Mercedes can start to lose control. Because enough is not easy to explain to millions of people watching a crash, a yellow flag, and a pole lap happening almost on top of each other. A driver can lift and still look fast. A driver can lose a tenth and still gain the result. A driver can technically meet the standard and still leave rivals feeling the spirit of the rule was broken. That is why this controversy feels bigger than a normal qualifying argument. It lives in the space between legal and believable. Mercedes wants the lap to live in the legal space. Ferrari wants to drag it into the believable space. And once that happens, the debate changes completely. Because fans do not need the full telemetry file to understand the image. Verstappen crashes. Yellow flags appear. Antonelli backs out. Russell keeps going. Leclerc loses pole. That sequence is devastatingly simple. And simple stories are the hardest to kill. Mercedes can talk about a single yellow. They can talk about a lift. They can talk about a time loss. They can talk about the original decision. But Ferrari only has to keep returning to the same point. One Mercedes driver abandoned the lap. The other took pole. That comparison is brutal because Kimi Antonelli is not an outsider. He is not a Ferrari driver. He is not a rival trying to create drama. He is Russell's teammate. Same garage, same team colors, same pressure, same championship environment. And when the yellow flag appeared, Antonelli chose the cleanest possible response. He backed out. No gray area. No argument. No question about whether his lift was enough. Russell made a different decision. He kept the lap alive. And that decision won him pole, but it also gave Ferrari the exact weapon it needed. Because if Ferrari can make Russell's lift look too small, too late, or too convenient, then the accusation becomes personal. It is no longer only about whether the lap should stand. It becomes about whether Russell's explanation can be trusted. That is why the word lying is so explosive. It attacks the driver, not just the lap. A driver can survive a mistake. Formula One drivers make mistakes at impossible speeds. They lock up. They misjudge flags. They lose the rear. They get caught by timing. Mistakes are part of the sport. But a driver accused of saying one thing while the data suggests another faces something much more damaging. A trust problem. And trust is everything in a championship team. Mercedes needs to trust Russell's judgment. Russell needs the team to trust his word. Antonelli needs to trust that safe decisions will not be quietly punished. Ferrari needs to trust that the rules are applied strongly enough. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile needs the paddock to trust the original decision. One yellow flag zone now touches all of that. That is why this is not just about Leclerc potentially gaining first place. It is about whether Mercedes' strongest Saturday weapon has become its most dangerous weakness. Because pole position should give Russell authority. It should say he delivered when the pressure was highest. It should silence questions about whether Antonelli is beginning to take control of the team's future. It should remind Ferrari that Mercedes still has the speed to answer every attack. But this pole does not silence questions. It creates them. Did Russell do enough? Did Mercedes defend too quickly? Did Ferrari see something in the trace? Did the stewards apply the standard strongly enough? And why did Antonelli abandon the lap if Russell could still finish his? Those questions matter because they create pressure before the race even begins. A clean pole makes a driver look untouchable. A disputed pole makes a driver look exposed. And Ferrari knows exposed drivers are easier to attack. Not necessarily with speed, with doubt. Doubt changes everything. It changes interviews. It changes the mood in the garage. It changes how rivals talk. It changes how fans interpret every move. It changes how a team principal chooses words. It changes how a driver feels when the same flag appears again later in the season. That is why Ferrari's possible proof is such a powerful part of the story. It does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be a secret recording or some theatrical discovery. In Formula One, the most damaging evidence can be cold and quiet. A throttle line, a speed trace, a comparison against the previous lap, a small acceleration point that comes too early, a sector that does not show the sacrifice rivals expected. That is the kind of detail that can turn a celebration into a defense. And Mercedes cannot outrun that kind of evidence. A fast car cannot argue with a data trace. A team principal cannot talk a graph into changing shape. A driver cannot rewrite what the car recorded in the exact moment the yellow flag appeared. That is what makes telemetry so threatening, is the car's memory. And if Ferrari believes that memory tells a different story from Russell's words, then Mercedes has to answer with more than emotion. They need clarity. They need the numbers to match the defense. They need the timing to match the explanation. They need the lift to be visible, meaningful, and strong enough that the argument dies. Because if the argument does not die, Ferrari wins something even without an official penalty. They win pressure. And pressure is a weapon in Formula One. Ferrari can force Mercedes to explain. They can force Russell to defend. They can force the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile into a conversation about consistency. They can keep Leclerc's lost pole alive in the public mind. They can make Antonelli's caution look smarter every time the controversy is replayed. That is a lot of damage from one question. Did Russell really lift? And the reason Mercedes should be worried is that Russell's name already carries weight in this area. He has faced yellow flag penalties earlier in his career. Those older moments do not prove anything about Austria. They do not decide the facts of this lap. But Formula One has a long memory. Rivals remember. Fans remember. The media remembers. So when Russell becomes part of another yellow flag debate, the reaction grows faster. The story does not feel isolated. It feels connected. That is not necessarily fair, but it is real. And in a sport where perception can become pressure, real is all that matters. Russell wants to be seen as a championship driver. Not just fast, not just talented, not just capable of a spectacular lap. A championship driver. Someone who can deliver under pressure without creating unnecessary chaos around the team. This controversy threatens that image, because it asks whether Russell, when everything was on the line, chose the correct amount of caution or the smallest amount he thought he could defend. That is a very different question, and Mercedes cannot answer it only by saying the lap was quick. Everyone knows it was quick. Ferrari's argument is not that Russell lacks speed. Ferrari's argument is that speed may have survived where it should have been sacrificed. That is why Leclerc matters so much here. Leclerc was not a distant second. He was close enough that Ferrari can feel every tiny detail. If Russell gained even a fraction too much through the yellow flag zone, or if he failed to give up what the rule demanded, then Leclerc's lost pole becomes more than disappointment. It becomes a grievance. And grievances are powerful in Ferrari. They fuel the team. They fuel the fans. They fuel the driver. They make a front row feel like unfinished business instead of a simple result. Vasseur knows that. A team principal has to protect more than strategy. He has to protect belief. He has to show Leclerc that Ferrari will not quietly accept a result that feels questionable. He has to show Mercedes that every gray area will be challenged. He has to show the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile that Ferrari expects the standard to be clear. That is why this fight matters even if the official outcome does not change. Because Ferrari can still change the emotional outcome. They can make Russell's pole feel less pure. They can make Mercedes look defensive. They can make the yellow flag rule look exposed. They can make Leclerc look like the driver who may have been denied a fair shot. And they can make Antonelli look like the driver who made the cleaner choice. That last part may be the most painful for Mercedes, because this is not just Ferrari against Russell. Is Russell against the comparison inside his own team? Antonelli backed out. Russell did not fully give up the lap. One choice removed risk. One choice delivered pole. One choice looked safe. One choice looked brilliant or dangerous, depending on who is telling the story. Mercedes needs both drivers to feel supported, but Austria creates a difficult message. If a team celebrates Russell too loudly, Antonelli's caution can look like a mistake. If the team praises Antonelli's safety instinct too much, Russell's pole can look morally weaker. If a team says both drivers acted correctly, Ferrari can ask why the two correct choices produced such different rewards.